Welcome once again to How to Disaster. Today's guest is Paul Lowenthal. Paul is many things. He is the public information officer for the city of Santa Rosa. He's a fire marshal. You're going to hear his alerts go off a lot during this podcast. He's also a fire survivor who lost his home in the first night of the North Bay Complex fires in 2017 that also affected where I live in Sonoma Valley and really started my trajectory into this field and his trajectory to a totally different side of what it means to be a technical expert in a fire. Since then, he has traveled all around the country at the request of FEMA to do mutual aid in other places. He's been a frequent volunteer with After the Fire. We have a kind of a funny disaster sibling relationship. I think you'll see some of that in here. I think you'll really enjoy it. And thank you once again for spending this time with us. Paul Lowenthal, so good to have you on How to Disaster.
Thank you, Jen. Great to see you and glad to be here and looking forward to How to Disaster.
Me too. You know, of all the people and my choices of who I knew I wanted to get on this whole first season of the relaunch, I knew I wanted you on there. I consider you a friend, a colleague, and we have a sibling-like relationship. So if people sense that in the background, it's just because we make fun of each other at a pretty fast clip, pretty regularly, but with a lot of affection. And so that I hope is part of it, but in a good way that makes it accessible for people. So thank you again, because I'm asking for you to access both sides.
Yeah, I look forward to it. And yes, you are right. It's been interesting to see how our relationship has evolved over the years. And it is like a disaster siblings, but for all the good reasons.
I agree. So I kind of wanted to start at the beginning because I want to talk to you about being a fire survivor, being one of the most respected professionals in this entire space who is leaned on from Cal OES and FEMA and a lot of mutual aid while still doing your job at home. And then also you've done a lot of volunteer work and walked along with After the Fire too. So we're going to talk about all of those things, but let's sort of begin at the beginning. And then for you, your fire story started the same day mine did, very different ways though, on October 8th, 2017. Can you start us there?
Yeah, so I had been in the fire service for quite some time. I had worked as a public information officer for a number of years, actually dating back to the station fire in 2009, was my first real glimpse at kind of the other side of quote unquote firefighting and more of a incident management team assistance. And that public information support continued for years, and I would never have guessed that I'd be responding to fires or disasters, but not from a public information officer standpoint, but from what would become a fire survivor standpoint, and then also a leader in fire recovery. The 2017 fires were something that we would have never imagined would not only happen, but happen in literally our own backyards. Working in the fire service, I was very used to going to other communities that had large-scale disasters, large-scale wildfires, being there for as long as they needed the quote-unquote firefighting help, or in some cases public information, and then coming back home and kind of putting everything that had happened out there aside and going on with my day-to-day job and really my life. Clearly that changed in 2017 when I initially took the public information role as those fires were evolving. And then within the first couple hours, realizing that not only was I working as a public information officer on what would become the most destructive wildfire in the state's history at that time, but also be one of the thousands of people that were directly affected by the fire with the destruction of my own home that early morning of the 9th.
So take us there. Like you are, so for those who are not aware, in our fires, they spanned 4 counties. And so Lake, Sonoma, Napa, and Mendocino. Paul is from the Santa Rosa area in Sonoma County. I live in Sonoma Valley, about 40 minutes from where Paul lives. So our fires are slightly different, but all of the event is one event called a complex event, a North Bay complex event. We lost 8,900 structures across the 4 counties. However, let's focus here on Santa Rosa, the Tubbs fire in Sonoma County. So you get a call. Take us from there.
Yeah, so I had actually just returned from a trip to Maui with my daughter. We returned that weekend, that evening. Sunday, hadn't even really finished unpacking yet. My daughter was going back to her mom's, and my phone started getting very active. It was kind of that eerie, warm, windy Sunday evening. The winds were really definitely picking up. You could feel the humidity going down, and we just started getting a lot of what we refer to as activity. Trees down, power lines down, a lot of small little grass fires, and kind of had that weird feeling that something's just not right. I'm originally from Southern California, so I remember very clearly growing up as a kid the Santa Ana winds, and that was probably the closest thing that I had experienced here in Sonoma County, Santa Rosa specifically, since I moved from my teenage and young childhood days in Pasadena.
And that's going to come up later in the podcast too.
Yeah, both Maui and Pasadena, Los Angeles.
Yeah, all of it.
So we had a number of fires burned in Santa Rosa, and finally what we thought was the big one was a fire that most people don't even realize happened. It was a fire on West 6th Street, kind of near the downtown Santa Rosa area. It had already destroyed one home, was burning what we refer to the Santa Rosa Creek, and was prompting the evacuation of a couple blocks of homes. For us, up until that point, that was a big deal. I can't really think of a time where we had literally evacuated a couple blocks of homes for a fire. We were working to bring that incident under control, and I remember having a conversation with one of our police lieutenants, John Stetchinger, who was part of our unified command at the command post, and I had gotten called out with my own what's referred to as a Type 3 incident management team, North Bay incident management team, to respond to a fire in Napa area. That would be known as the Tubbs fires, what we initially were called out for. As I went to leave the 6th Street incident, John from Santa Rosa Police looked at me and he's like, "Hey, where are you going?" And I said, "Apparently my incident management team is going to Napa for something, I believe called the Tubbs fire. And we're told that we need to check into the St. Helena CAL FIRE Center, which would require me to literally drive from Santa Rosa up and over the hills that would turn out to be on fire, and check in at their CAL FIRE headquarters." He looked at me and said, "Hey, if there's something that we should know about, will you give me a call?" And I looked at him thinking, what in the world would you possibly need to know about for something that's going on in Napa? But I said, sure, jumped in my car and responded north of Santa Rosa, got off at what is referred to as Mark West Springs Road, or the Mark West drainage, which would turn out to be kind of one of the leading factors of what the Tubbs fire did. Drove through that lower elevation and started climbing up into the hills, and it wasn't before too long, I literally hit a wall of fire. And could not get from Sonoma County into St. Helena. I found several chief officers kind of hunkered down on the Mark West Springs Road. I asked them, like, what fire is this? Because I knew, similar to what Jen was saying, there was fires burning all over the North Bay. And they said, this is the Tubbs fire. I said, I thought the Tubbs fire is in Napa. They said it was, but it's here. So I realized that I couldn't get to St. Helena. I turned around and started driving back towards the city. I got to literally the back doorsteps of the city and saw fire on a road that was just a block outside of the Santa Rosa city limits. And I realized this is the Tubbs fire, and it is literally starting to spot into the area adjacent to the city. So I pulled onto what's referred to as Cross Creek, which is the first street that you come to into the city of Santa Rosa from the Napa County, St. Helena, Calistoga area, and pulled over on the side of the road because I remembered it's an area that doesn't have great cell service, but I remembered that is an area that I could get cell service. I stopped there, and then realized the neighborhood was completely black, that there was no firefighting resources, there was no law enforcement, and I could actually see embers raining down into a sleeping neighborhood, and realized right away that the Tubbs fire was about to burn into Santa Rosa. I made a quick phone call to our fire chief, told him that the fire is burning into Fountain Grove, we need to evacuate a portion of the city, and then called that police lieutenant and told him that this is the area I need evacuated, which for a lot of your listeners probably don't realize, but when you say that you're going to evacuate everything from Brush Creek Road to Mendocino Avenue and north of Fountain Grove Parkway, that is huge, and that is a lot of residents.
Give us an idea though, of how many, though.
We're talking probably thousands of residents, and thousands of homes. And there was a decision made to, if that's what I was seeing, go even bigger and pretty much start to try and evacuate all of Fountain Grove.
And Fountain Grove, for people who don't know, because it really matters because it sits up on a ridge. Fire loves to climb up a hill. Did not know that before these fires. But also, it let people know, what are those evacuation routes even like in Fountain Grove?
Yeah, so Fountain Grove is referred to as our wildland urban interface. It is literally where you come out of our valley floor, our densely populated community, and to Jen's point, climbs up into our wildland urban interfaces, which were a lot of very large homes. It's our kind of upper class part of Santa Rosa, multi-million-dollar homes, and literally thousands of them, stacked into an area with a lot of tight roads. A major artery that kind of dissects Fountain Grove called Fountain Grove Parkway, which would serve as one of the major evacuation routes for getting those people out. But you got to also remember that these people were going to be asked to evacuate something that was literally already burning into their neighborhoods and not realizing it. We've heard, obviously, that still to this day that people were frustrated that they didn't get the notice. They didn't get a lot of the warnings. A lot of the systems that we have in place today, they didn't have back then. And when you realize that not only did they not have the warning, did they not have the notifications, but we didn't. And the fact that the only reason that those actions were started was literally because I just happened to be on an incident command team that happened to be dispatched to a location that I couldn't get to. I could not imagine what it would have been like had there not been the communication and had those sequence of events not happened, and those people would have literally still been home as the fires were burning into their neighborhoods.
And what time is it about? What time frame are we looking at? Because people if they're not familiar, they don't know about the nighttime piece of it.
Yeah, so this is probably around 1:30 in the morning. And so the fire
people
started...
are at home asleep. They
Correct.
Don't know.
Right. And so this fire started October 8th in the late evening, but was able to literally burn from Calistoga all the way into Santa Rosa, which is, as a crow's flies, miles and miles and miles and miles, and was able to do that in 4 hours.
Is it 20 miles? I've heard 20 miles. Does that sound right to you?
That's a great question.
I think it's 20 miles.
That sounds about right.
And people were calling, they could see the glow. So people were calling dispatch, but nobody had seen it move that fast before. So it didn't occur to anyone that it could move that fast.
Yeah, and there's also this notion, and they used it, that the fire is moving in X number of football fields per minute or per hour. And there's this, in some cases, it is literally a wall of fire that is burning through a forest or through heavy brush or through grass. In this particular case, that was not what we were experiencing. The ember cast that was coming off of not only the vegetation, the timber, but the thousands of structures was starting fires in front of fires in front of fires that were burning into each other. And it was creating a condition that clearly had never been experienced like that here locally to that level.
So people have to think of it like almost like if a hurricane winds met a wildfire and turned into a mega fire, because you don't have a mega fire if you don't have winds. It just doesn't happen because you don't have the ember cast, like emissaries running ahead to make new fires. And so
And winds in a a more rural area, and pushing a wind-driven fire, clearly that's not uncommon, right? I mean, we had seen large-scale vegetation fires across California for decades, whether it was in Southern California, and quite honestly, whether it was in Lake County or Colusa or areas north of Sonoma County, that were having large-scale wildfires, but not the level of destruction that we had experienced. When you look at the winds that Jennifer's speaking to, and now you're adding a housing stock that was not built to withstand a wildland fire in our community. That a lot of people looked at Fountain Grove as a quote unquote newer neighborhood, newer subdivision, newer community. It was still built in the late 80s to early 90s. And on a scale of things, yes, that's new, comparatively speaking to a lot of the other housing stock in Santa Rosa. It's not new when it comes to codes. And so literally you're looking at a community that was set up for disaster. It was just like my own home. It was a warm, breezy evening. And what does everybody do on nice, warm, breezy evenings? They have doors open. They have windows open. They're kind of enjoying that airflow. And when they're asked to evacuate, they're not closing doors. They're not closing garage doors. And when they're asked to evacuate, they're not closing doors. They're not closing garage doors. They're not doing everything that they would do today with an evacuation checklist, with alert warnings, with hours, if not like a day to plan, depending on what the nature of the event is. Being requested to just get up in the middle of the night and leave. That likely could have been even what led to our own fire station being destroyed. So clearly, just a lot of fuel, a lot of structures, and a significant amount of wind pushing a fire into a community that is no longer now a vegetation fire. It's not a wildland urban interface fire. Yeah. It is now literally neighborhoods and an urban conflagration that, had the winds not start to die down that morning of the 9th, and had the winds continued, or had that fire started earlier, we likely would have seen that fire not only push out of Fountain Grove into our valley floor and our densely populated community of Coffey Park, but we have no doubt it would have continued to push clear towards downtown Santa Rosa.
You know, we have so many things to talk about, but I do want to close the loop on it's 1:30 in the morning. And at what point, when you're figuring all of this out, do you realize that your own house is burning?
Yeah, so myself and Jonathan Cox were the two public information officers assigned to the incident. We actually found ourselves, like everybody else, not actually doing what you would think we'd be there for. Is we were evacuating people. We were literally getting people out of their homes, helping evacuate residents. And as the fire continued to push into Fountain Grove, we realized around 2:30 in the morning that we need to shift gears, and we need to focus on our mission and help continue to support public information. The incident command post for the fire had moved to what would be known as the Kmart parking lot. Mm-hmm. The Kmart turned out to eventually be completely destroyed, but that's where the command post on the Santa Rosa side was initially set up. We were sitting in the Kmart parking lot, kind of strategizing what our plan of action was going to be, what we needed to continue with evacuations on, making tactical decisions. And then I started hearing street names and streets that they were pulling out of because there was nothing that they can do. And I recognized my neighborhood. I immediately started to jump into my car, and Jonathan looked at me. He's like, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I need to get up there and understand what the fire did from a personal standpoint, and then also from a incident standpoint." In my mind, I had no idea that the fire had literally spit out the bottom of the Mark West drainage and had apparently wiped out and destroyed my neighborhood and neighborhoods all around it. But to me, that was much different than what I had experienced in Fountain Grove. And so I had a vested interest, obviously, in seeing what happened in my neighborhood, but ultimately understanding where's this fire going, because we now have a job to potentially provide information and understand a much more complex fire. We responded code 3 from the Kmart parking lot up and over the Highway 101 freeway, which the fire was jumping, drove north on what's referred to as Old Redwood Highway, where we're leaving the city and driving into unincorporated Santa Rosa. only about a mile or two to my house, but there was fire on both sides of the road, and every structure that I was passing was completely engulfed in fire. And it was at that point. And it was at
We're
that
just going to
point.
go with all of your notifications, given the very we are in peak fire season, and you are a fire person.
Yes.
Just keep it in. It's fine. Everybody just deal with it. If you're listening to it on Audible and you're like, what, or audio, and you're like, what is that? It's his emergency notifications.
Correct. Not just for anything, but for actual fires that are taking place, which is
real
why I could be
fires.
having this conversation and having my phone continue to make notifications.
I like to call it on brand.
Yes. So continuing to drive north on Old Rabbit Highway, I came to the mouth of my neighborhood and saw that it was completely engulfed in fire. There was no resources around, rightfully so. There was nothing that was going to stop what was continuing to push into the community, and the winds that we were experiencing. Realized right away, I now have a better idea that the fire spit out the Mark West drainage and then turned from heading west directly to the south because it was getting that north wind, and that is what was then now pushing into Coffee Park and literally destroying block after block after block of homes in Coffee Park before it eventually started to slow down.
It did. So, and again, as yours was slowing down, Nunn's fire, where I was like picking up speed and taking out 25% of Glen Ellen's housing stock. And like our worst day was like 5 days in, and your worst day was the first 24 hours, if that's a fair thing to say. I do want people to understand that one of the craziest things about this fire is there's like a 6-lane freeway between Paul's house and Coffee Park, and we can see where it was on the overpass, and then it went and it burned the redwood trees on the other side of the overpass. And so I always picture it like it's a person or something, or a monster, and it gets to the bottom of Fountain Grove, and it looks left, looks right, and then it just takes the overpass and then goes out and takes out Coffee Park. But that's probably overly simplifying it and making it a little too human, but that's how I think about it.
Yes, a lot of people talked about how, it jumped Highway 101, but really when you think about what we were talking about earlier, and that it wasn't truly a wall of fire, that we are experiencing spot fires like you wouldn't believe. Clearly the fire was able to get from both sides. Clearly, the fire was able to get from one side.
Look at all this realism we're injecting.
One side of Highway 101 to the other side, and then just keep literally eating away.
Eating away. So that is the beginning of your fire story. And one of the things that's really interesting about our fires, it didn't feel interesting at the time, is that we didn't have a real model for how to actually walk through this. And we were really grateful for any help that Lake County gave us from the 2015 fires in Middletown. But we kind of had to figure it all out. And you were at the center of that. And so I was like in my infancy in this job for sure, and just trying to learn. And then watching, a lot of my job was like watching and listening to the people doing the actions on the ground, because I was just trying to learn it as we were soft infrastructure. You took on a big outsized role. I mean, it was a really big role that next year. Can you talk about what some of those challenges and what some of the questions were? What did you get that you needed, and what did you not get that you would have loved to have had?
So I think it's also interesting to note how I got quote unquote stuck in that role.
Voluntold. Go ahead.
Yeah. So clearly, like Jennifer was saying, we had seen, and a lot of us had been on a lot of those fires in Lake County. I think the list of fires I was on before ours, the Y, Rocky Valley, Jerusalem, Clayton Cold, like the list goes on. And I was on those as a public information officer with an incident management team. And we had seen, clearly homes were destroyed, whether it was a half a dozen, whether it was 100. And we always knew that there was a process for how those things get dealt with, either at a local level or a state level to some level. But we hadn't had that experience here locally. At the time, I was our hazmat business program manager for the Santa Rosa Fire Department, where our fire department manages, permits, and provides oversight of businesses that store and use or generate hazardous materials and hazardous waste. When we realized that we were dealing with over 6,000 structures destroyed just on around the Tubbs fire, plus everything with the Nuns, the Atlas, all the other fires. Cal OES and FEMA had literally a meeting with the city manager of Santa Rosa and the county administrator of Sonoma. And they had recommended putting together a task force. And one of the task forces of the two main ones that they needed was debris. And the county had moved their health officer into a lead role for the county. And the city manager basically was trying to figure out what's the closest thing the fire department has or the city has to a health officer. And because as the Coupa Hazmat program manager, I understood what hazardous waste was. I had no idea what phase 1 or phase 2 were because that wasn't really a thing back then. Right. But I was the closest thing they had, and I was basically voluntold that you're going to be leading or running some task force. I would have had no idea that the email that I eventually got from the city manager directing me to be that role would lead to literally now almost 8 years.
There were almost 9 years.
9, yeah, sorry.
We're coming up on 9.
All sorts of blur together, but almost 9 years now of not only direct recovery responsibilities in my community, but being able to be lucky enough to provide support to a number of communities that we will get into, but whether it's Maui, whether it's Los Angeles, Florida, South Carolina, Texas, Washington, Oregon, being asked for assistance from Cal OES and FEMA, like Jennifer was talking about. And it's felt good to be able to use what I would end up learning to support other communities in their recovery.
You literally show up to teach them how to disaster. That is functionally what you're doing. You're like, here's a framework, don't reinvent it. Here's your ideas, best practices.
Yeah, I think I have become very good friends with John Smith, who is the director of recovery for Maui. There's a lot to unpack there of how that relationship evolved. But to your point, when he first met me and we were working between the city of Santa Rosa, 5 of us were sent to Maui by FEMA to help support them in the early stages of the recovery. There's a lot of traditions in Maui. There's a lot of culture in Maui. They looked at us like, what are you people doing on our island? And who are you to tell us like what we should or shouldn't be doing? And that was never our intention. And after a very direct and personal, about hour-long conversation when we first got there, John Smith, several other individuals from Maui County's leadership looked at us and were like, oh, okay, we understand now. And the way that those relationships then blossomed and truly stuck, and to this day are as strong as they are for as long after their fires that they are today, speaks to why John referred to me as his quote unquote crystal ball. To where we were able to not only help make recommendations or help guide and answer questions, but tell them what they were going to be experiencing, whether it's 3 months after their fire, 6 months after their fire, a year after their fire. And sure enough, all the things that we would discuss and strategize about, literally John would call me and say, oh my God, the thing that you told me was going to happen actually happened. And I was able to go through and line out what I felt that we should be doing that made sense for us. But the only reason I knew that we should be taking those steps is because I had that conversation with you 3 months ago. And that's truly what the great part of us leaning on one another and being there for one another, and having organizations not just like Santa Rosa Fire, but after the fire, able to connect a lot of us with one another, has really benefited communities not only across California, but across the country.
And it heals us at the same time. I mean, there's so much to be said for, you don't want to waste all of this knowledge and experience that you earned that you never asked for. And it was It's pretty hard. It's such a grind to go through. But if you can make that grind less terrible for another community, it's the best. I just think that we get healed so much from that they're helped and we are healed in so many ways. That's my theory of the case.
Yes, I concur.
Bet my whole life on it, in fact. Okay, so you go through, figuring out all these systems, right? Like debris removal may sound, if you've never done a disaster, you're like, move on to the exciting stuff, back to the flames. And you're like, well, here's the reality. The news may go away when it's time to do debris removal, but debris removal is a really hard thing to jump into because there's not as bad now, but conflicting information. Like we had to have arguments about if you could keep your foundation, you can't, that people compare it to a house fire. And you're like, this is not a house fire. This is something entirely different. It burns hotter. It's more destructive. So the concrete's not we won't get too much into the rubble, so to speak, but in that first year, what do you wish you'd had more of besides sleep?
It's hard to answer that question because although there's a lot of things I wish happened differently, I think a lot of people don't realize a lot of what we went through is what has made other recoveries so successful. Not just from rebuilding, but from a policy standpoint.
Yes.
We ended up working closely with US EPA, with FEMA, with Army Corps of Engineers, but we were also working with agencies that had never dealt with a wildland urban interface fire at that level of destruction. Mm-hmm. Those federal agencies had processes dialed down for dealing with floods, for dealing with tornadoes, for dealing with hurricanes. But there was a lot of issues that we were running into, and not only trying to address with FEMA, but also at the same time advocating on behalf of our community, because we were trying to obviously do everything that we could to move our community forward with recovery. That played a really big role in not only our ability to get Santa Rosa back to where it is today and as quickly as we did it, but also truly affected other communities and their ability to get services and to get funding and to get programs after ours. I'll use the insurance issue. Alternate living expenses, and a lot of those things were new in 2017. There were rules that were in place back then that were much different than they are today. The city of Santa Rosa made a very calculated decision, even when the fire was literally still smoldering and burning before containment was done. There was already conversations that we were having at a task force level, at a city leadership level, that we were going to put a system in place that would allow an individual to rebuild in between 2 and 3 years. That was the goal. And we did everything that we could to put those systems in place, whether it was investing $12 million into a permit center that was a standalone permit center that did not rely on city staff, that was able to just focus on our community survivors, to looking at policies and ordinances that revolved around rebuilding and what changes could be made to those policies and what can we do to streamline the processes, whether it was not requiring landscaping before somebody occupies, to what could be done. And when you look at the totality of everything we did, not only from a task force level and advocating for our community and the city, but from a policy standpoint, it helped us be successful, and it's allowed us to kind of serve as a lesson learned to a lot of other communities. The biggest thing, I
call it pioneering in so many ways. Like you had to pioneer. You had to.
I think and it's always kind of a weird thing to talk about, but one of our success stories, and agree with it or disagree with it, is I made a choice to let the incident, the leadership of Cal OES, FEMA, the city and I am trying to be careful how I say it, but almost take advantage of me.
Jessica, we're here at the Pali Hub, which means activity. So what really happened here today? There was a ribbon cutting for what?
There's a ribbon cutting for the grand opening of our hub, Pali Hub. It is the center, the source where we are going to be providing Monday through Friday resources for the entire community.
So what kind of resources might they be? I'm from the Highlands. I haven't lived in my house for a year. We had a little bit of insurance. What might you do for someone like me?
So there's three main things that the LTRG has a goal, long-term recovery group. There's three main aspects that we bring forward, which is money, manpower, and materials. And those three things can come in a variety of ways. One of the things that we were talking about today is we just got an additional grant from our community foundation for additional wellness funds. And one of the things the founder was saying was that, it might not always be obvious to people, wellness, well, I need a new house. How is wellness going to make a difference? Well, the truth is that we are under so much pressure. We are in a disaster zone. We've all undergone trauma. The aspect of wellness is what helps bring us together. It's what helps our nervous system settle for long enough just so that we can then tackle the actual issues at hand. And for each resident, it's going to be a little bit different. So wellness is a key component always of every single disaster. So some organizations are going to fund us for wellness activities. That could look like a senior luncheon to get our seniors in and come. It could be a mother's support group. It could be a listening session. It could be education. We can actually educate people on how to manage their own disaster on their own. And so that is what we are doing here. And it's going to be ongoing, and it's going to be Monday through Friday, and we're going to be inviting all of these state and governmental agencies, as well as all of the national agencies that are voluntary for disaster. You bring them in, and they come in and they work with people. Last week, Habitat for Humanity just launched the very first house that they're building in the Pacific Palisades. That's exciting. We get to share that information with the community.
But wait a minute, Jessica. This is the Palisades. Isn't everybody rich? Why would Habitat for Humanity be here?
Yes, we felt rich for sure. On most days, people always say, living in the Palisades makes you a lucky person. It didn't necessarily make you rich. And some people felt land rich because we owned land. But unfortunately, when a fire comes, it takes away your ability to pay your mortgage. It forces you to be displaced and have to cover rent or mortgage elsewhere. The insurance companies didn't necessarily come through for the majority of our residents. So we end up, those who maybe felt very wealthy, end up on a spectrum where we don't even have enough funding to come home.
I even met a woman who, she and her husband had paid off their $3 million house, but just were between insurance when it burned down. So now what do you do? Now, what is GEM behind us? What does this have to do with your organization?
So GEM stands for Global Empowerment Mission. They're an organization that's one of the greatest leaders on the planet. And they have been in tens of countries. They're currently in several dozen countries offering services after disaster. They are disaster specialists. They are boots on the ground. They're currently in Ukraine. They're in Jamaica. They're in Hawaii. They're in Texas. They're everywhere. They're in Alaska. And what do? They provide emergency service resources, but on top of that, they also do long-term recovery.
So how did you convince them to come here? This is not Ukraine. This is not the Congo. Why did they listen?
They listened because they came here and they met us and they spoke to us and they realized that there was a big gap here and that it wasn't being addressed.
Because many homeowners inherited their homes, right? It wasn't always.
We are a community that started in the 20s and 50s, and a lot of these homeowners is intergenerational homes. So a lot of these people were either on reverse mortgages or it was homes that were passed down. They weren't rich. They had, they were teachers and nurses and the like and plumbers and they could afford to live in their homes as long as they didn't burn to the ground.
So they need help. Now, so many groups were supporting you. The governor's office, the mayor's office, Supervisor Horvath's office, the councilwoman's office. Weren't you simply a homeowner who lost her home? Why did people listen to you? What about your background made you ideal for this position?
So first, I'm a social worker. I worked for a decade in this community at our local synagogue. So that helps. I'm also a gerontologist. I work with the most vulnerable population in this community for over a decade. And so because of that, I had a lot of experience with case management. I had a lot of connections. I also happen to be the president of the Pacific Palisades Residents Association, an organization that had been around for over 60 years. So with that, I held a permanent seat on the community council, and I just so happened to be highly active in a lot of our other community organizations. If it's not clear, I love this community. I absolutely love this community. I'm deeply connected and intertwined. We all are. We are all kind of enmeshed. We love it. We love the heartbeat of the community. I have 2 children who grew up in this, born and raised here. And so why am I a perfect candidate? Why not?
So, driving here, you drive past the burned down pink Starbucks building, breaks your heart, the Cafe Vita that we all loved. There's a lot of destruction on the way to this block. Why would you encourage people that might not even be clear what they could find here to just come and visit and find out?
The heartbeat of the community, it's here. It never left. It's here. So we need to come back here, right where it belongs. And yes, it might look different right now, but this is home. And it's our job to convince people to come home. So I'm here every single day. You'll find me at Garden Cafe. You'll find me up and down the streets talking to people. You'll find me shopping at any store that wants to open up. But this is it. We have to come home. That's the only way we're going to figure it out. And the more we come home, the more we keep the energy and the heartbeat of this community going. And that's what this is all about. We could build structures, but that won't bring back home. What brings back home is the people.
Well, thank you for being community. We're very excited.
Thank you.
Hi, sir. Can you tell us your name and where you're from?
I'm Peter Friedman and from Pacific Palisades.
Did you lose your home or is it still standing?
It was vaporized on the Palisades fire back on the 7th of January last year.
Where have you been since then, Peter?
7 places.
Yeah. Is that how you imagined spending your retirement?
No, absolutely not. It's feel like we've been deserted by our city leaders.
Have you had any help with FEMA or SBA or anything like that?
No.
So how have you been able to afford rent?
Well, luckily, our daughter invited us to live with her family, and that's where we spent the last year.
And did you have insurance or no?
Had insurance, which did not apply the right policy for us, and we're in litigation with them at this moment.
Okay, so you're here today at a Pali Long-Term Recovery Group luncheon for seniors. Why do you come to these things?
First, to network to see what other people are doing. It is real challenging because there's so many different stories, so many different challenges people are going through. And the forgotten group in the Palisades are the seniors. 40% of the community is made up of seniors. And unfortunately, they're being taken advantage of by various contractors, architects, and surreptitious individuals. In fact, I was just talking to one of the former leaders of our community to find out that she was swindled on $39,000.
I'm so sorry. By a contractor, by insurance?
By a contractor.
By a contractor. Yeah. Do you have a place that you trust that you can go for guidance in the build back process?
Well, the 2 places that I look to are the LTRG, which is with Jessica, and with the PRC, which is with Miriam.
And so you feel like there is a haven. Those are both havens where you can go in and be listened to and be guided.
yes, but they have their limitations also.
So what would you like to see happen, Peter? What do you think would be fair?
Well, I think we need a focused leadership group in this community and the ability to process and designate financial structure to the rebuilding. There are so many different cogs in this wheel that needs attention, whether it be from resilience to finances, to bringing back families, businesses, taxes, the infrastructure, businesses. There's so many things to be taken care of, but it isn't because it's so fragmented at this time.
It's so fragmented. So events like these, what role do they play for you? How do you find out about senior luncheons like this? And what role do they play?
The invitations come in through the internet. You sign up to join these various groups, whether it's through the LPRG, whether it's through the
PRC?
Palisades Recovery Coalition, or even with the PPCC.
And let me ask you, do you plan to come back?
To move back into the community?
Yeah.
We are in the community with our daughter.
Oh, how wonderful. Well, Peter, don't give up. Be a voice of guidance to help your fellow seniors. And I'm sure glad you have a place like LTRG, aren't you?
Yes.
You really are. Okay, best of luck to you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Hey, Miss, can you tell me who you are and where we are?
I'm Mary Kinselberg. I lived on 1046 Monument Street for 33 years. I raised my son there, and I come to these luncheons to see my friends, to meet other people, to hear the speakers, to have some laughs, and sometimes we cry.
Yep.
But we go over, what we lost and what we're going to be doing.
Did your house burn down, Mary?
My house burned down.
I'm so sorry.
I lost everything. I didn't bring anything with me.
No.
And I'm an artist, so I lost 200 paintings.
Oh, that's unbelievable.
I did shows, and I was a jewelry designer before I was an artist. So
Oh my God.
I lost all my molds and my jewelry that I designed.
Well, you know what I heard from a beautiful artist in Altadena? She said, Kim, she lost him. There are always more walls to fill. Wasn't
right.
that wonderful?
That's right. I set up a studio in my little tiny apartment, and I'm getting back to my art.
That will help. That will help.
Yes. And, I think I really want to come back to the Palisades, and I would love to build on my lot. It's, for me, the best lot in the whole place, because right down 20 steps is the farmer's market and the new village. So, I really, hopefully, will come back.
How many places have you been since the fires? How many times have you moved?
We've moved 5 times, and we're now in Santa Monica. It's very different. It's like living in the big city.
Than the country.
Yeah.
And with your neighbors that you know. How have you kept your spirits up, Mary?
I think all the friends I knew that lost their homes, and we sort of laugh now because we joke about things that nobody understands. And we sort of just have like a little club, like a secret little club, and support each other.
That's really great. Well, I see that, the long-term recovery group, the PRCC, there's a lot of groups. How do you find out what they're doing? How do you keep abreast?
So for the American Legion luncheons, the senior luncheons, I found it online, and I did volunteer for the last one, and I'd like to volunteer for some more. They're all online.
And what do you hope for the future of the Palisades? Do you think this fire could ever happen again?
It could happen again. The future is going to be very optimistic, but people are going to have sprinklers on their roofs. They're going to have a lot of fireproofing in their homes. So even if it does happen again, I'm getting chills thinking about it. It's not going to be destroying homes. We're going to have a fire department, and we're going to have actually reservoirs that have water in them.
And, no one could expect a fire hurricane. I was here 30 years. We never, ever got an evacuation warning, ever, except that day. And the fire never came to the ocean, except that day, right? So, Mary, tell me about the book you wrote, what you did.
So I'm an artist. I didn't have any way to create art. So one night, in the middle of the night, I thought, why don't I interview people that lost their homes? It'll help me. It'll help them heal. So I took my phone and I recorded everything they said about their homes and transcribed it. And this book is now 25 interviews. A few dropped out. And I just put I owned the book, and gave everybody the book. And they came by to get it, or I sent it in the mail.
Isn't it wonderful? You're going to have to give us a copy of it. You self-published, Mary?
Yeah, and I have written a book before, so it wasn't like the first time I was doing a book.
What's the name of the book?
The name of the book is Palisades Fire Interviews. It's not that original.
Yeah, but you did it. And how can we get one if we want one?
I would love to give you one. I have it in my trunk of my car as we speak in the parking lot.
How awesome.
I will give you one.
Well, I can't wait. And also, keep up the good work. Your smile says a lot, and it really is an attitude we can all learn from. So thank you, Mary, so much.
Thank you so much.
People started realizing it, and quite honestly, I realized it myself, that I was now reporting, even though I worked for the fire department, I was reporting directly to the city manager. I was running recovery of a task force for the city manager, working directly with leadership of CalOS and FEMA and Army Corps and US EPA. But I also lost, my own home was destroyed in the fire. Yeah. And so people started realizing right away, not only is this beneficial to have Paul in these state and federal meetings, because again, none of this had happened before this level, but not only could he speak as a representative advocating for the city of Santa Rosa, but he could also say, well, actually, no, that's not what's happening. Here's what my insurance told me, or here's what I'm experiencing as a survivor, as an individual that was affected by it. And that's what we're actually asking the city and county to relay to the community isn't going to work, and here's why. And right. People started realizing, like, holy cow, this is gold. And I made a conscious decision that I was going to sign up for the right of entry program, the government at the time referred to as the government-sponsored debris removal program. And there was videos made of me, as my position in the fire department. Signing my right of entry, following it to the ROE center, the right of entry center, taking these steps to not only show that that I'm helping lead the recovery, but also ultimately I'm advocating for myself. And so there quickly became a level of trust amongst the community, which again helped support a lot of the great work that our city's plan and economic development department were doing, that everybody was doing to rebuild, and that we were working together as people that were affected and leading the recovery.
That is a big deal, and you can speak to this to the degree that you are comfortable with, but it also meant, though, that, you didn't stop working for like 10 months, though. Like, you were working all the time, and that's starting from night of. And, you are a human being. You're not a machine. And so there was a reckoning around that.
Yeah, and it was, and again, I don't regret by any means anything I did. I truly felt like the work that we were all doing was for the right reason. Yeah. I was clearly 9 years younger than I am now. I'm still here with the fire department today. I had a daughter, or have a daughter. She was a lot younger, 9 years younger. And I was working. I was working literally 7 days a week after we went from working almost 24 hours a day to every day, 12, 14, 15-hour days, if not longer. multiple meetings a day, every day, 7 days a week for months. But again, that was the pace that we set for our city and for our community. I don't want to ever sound like I am, questioning or saying anything negative about another community's fire recovery. But I've been in other communities where in their first couple weeks, I've been invited to some of their meetings and seeing that, well, they just recessed this task force meeting on a Thursday and they're not planning to reconvene until Monday. And in my mind, it's like, oh God, I got to have a conversation with them that there's a pace. There's things that you could be missing if your task force literally isn't going to meet now this early on for 4 days. Like, here's all the things that you can be thinking about, So
also, it changes. Like, the learning curve is really steep, but also the dynamics are so fluid. And so, just for people who don't know, especially when you're learning something and it is so dynamic and is there benzene in the water? How many people have perished? Why did they perish? Where did they do that? Have we recovered them? Have we been respectful? Are we communicating enough? All of those things go into this big matrix of care that you have to think about. So Paul is not like saying, oh, you need to drive yourself into the ground. He's saying that for a particular, for a period of time, an accelerated pace will serve you.
Correct. And the other piece of it about why, like, it may feel like you need the break, but it also, to me, like, my biggest lesson that I learned was that I put myself in a position where I was a task force leader, and people that I talked to after I went through my experience and literally probably shaved several years off my life and used to have a lot more hair than I have now. I learned
For those of you who are just listening, he has none.
Correct.
No hair at all.
But that, to me, like, when we did this again in 2020 during the glass fire, I had a counterpart. I put systems in place where you can lean on one another. I think what a lot of us learned right away is that we had massive organizational structures running the recovery, but we only had a few of us at the very high level. And it made it very difficult for us to disengage without the wheels falling off. And could we have disengaged? Absolutely. Did we need the time off? 100%. But it became a thing of where I would not have been able to sleep at night knowing that there was the potential that thousands of people could be affected. And it highlighted the importance of, for others going through this, building systems that support one another and having multiple people in leadership and not being afraid of bringing people that may not be at your level in your organization that are but from lower levels, whether they're deputy directors or supervisors. But not only do they have the ability to cover for you, but they're going to be your leaders in 5-10 years from now. And in the event that you go through this again, they're going to be there to understand the steps that they took and think about what should be done or what could be done better. That's where we're in this weird space right now. We're even here in the city of Santa Rosa, from the people, and say that the 12 to 15 people that were really heavily involved in the fire recovery of the city, there's really only 4 of us left that were here in 2017 that were at the levels that would be able to step right in and run fire recovery. And that's a little scary, right? Because it's hard to have the perfect playbook for the disaster. But the training, the communications, the everything we're trying to do is designed to not only help the community that's going through it, but to also think about what we could be doing to help prepare communities in the event that they're impacted.
So it's a basic succession plan, right? I mean, it's a sharing of the teachings, it's mentoring, but it's a succession plan. So I think that's a really good note on how to disaster, quite frankly, is because sometimes in some communities, in all of them to some degree, people get afraid of inviting people to walk alongside of them or to take over for them because they think, oh, that I'll lose my spot in this disaster. And it's not that they are, it's not even a power trip so much as I want to make sure that it's done right for the people because it's the most important thing, most important work of my life, right? And so you don't want to get it wrong. And so some people are afraid to bring those people along, but you have to. You can't do it all by yourself.
No, and whether you think of it as recovery as a race or a marathon, I look at it more as like being able to pass the baton to somebody.
Yeah.
These recoveries go on for years. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, Santa Rosa has Coffee Park. The thousands of homes that were destroyed there is rebuilt to 97, 98% right now. Yes, Fountain Grove still has some redevelopment going on, but there's a ton of construction that's still taking place. We're looking at changing uses of some of the properties that are left. It's been really interesting to see how a community like ours has evolved, but also how other communities, even to this day, are coming and wanting to see, like, what does Santa Rosa look like 9 years later? Why are you?
I'm about to hit you up for that. I have a request actually from some other LA people who want to come and look at that too. So we're gonna do that. Sorry, I know I interrupted you.
No, and that's exactly. But that's those are the kind of things that we want, that we want to hear. And you and I were together when the Maui leadership was at the summit. And we took them on a tour, and to have them drive on buses with us and go through from the time they left the summit, be able to drive through the Nuns Fire, the Glass Fire, the Tubbs Fire, and then see kind of the progression of the different fires, but then see the amount of recovery, and then what's potentially still under construction, even in a community like ours, I think was really eye-opening for them, but helpful. It kind of helps set expectations, helps those that are going to be leading recovery understand like what potentially is ahead, and or what, again, back to why we look forward to working with Jennifer and people that she brings in. Again, what can we give back to other communities based on what we've experienced here locally?
It is one of my favorite things. For context, when we talk about a community being rebuilt, after the fire, we look at it like 85%. That's what we're looking for when people are asking, or if we're doing media interviews, they want to know, like, what can we do? Because some people will always make the decision to leave their lots a particular type of way, and they just lay fallow. And so we're looking at 85% because that's back to almost normal. And we did well. I mean, we did that in 5 to 6 years. And then the lingering 15 will just be the lingering 15 until it's like 5%. Now we're like probably 5%. But I feel like the success is reached at 85%. That's how I define it. I want to actually get into the ways and the places that you've paid it forward. And I want to start with Maui and then move to LA. So I was in meetings with you, listening, definitely not leading any of those meetings early on in our own fires in 2017, and then for the year that followed for sure. But our paths crossed more intentionally in Maui. And so if you could talk to us about how is Maui for you, and why is it so personal? And, in your relationship with John, I don't know if you've seen their new, their 3-year shorts that they're doing, but John comes on at one point and he just is like, he's like a big kid when he's talking about how he feels when he knows what's coming for Maui. So can you talk about why it's personal, how you got called, what happened?
Yeah, so I will say that I actually just did talk to John yesterday. Maybe yesterday or Tuesday.
You guys,
and
I have to tell you.
He actually literally was telling me about it, and we were talking about when we were going to see each other again. But yes, he said that he was involved in them, and it is great to see how these relationships and these conversations, like, I would have not guessed that this would come up or that would come up while I was just talking to John. But yes, it's I think what
I need everybody to know that the bromance is so strong here that last year at the Wildfire Leadership Summit, we made a panel of it and we wanted them specifically to talk about it. And at first they looked at me like I was nuts because I wasn't asking them to talk about like technical stuff. I wanted them to talk about the relational part of it and how it's so important. So talk to us about Maui.
Yeah, and the panel was very well received. You are right. I was not sure at first, and everybody was like, that was one of the best panels I've ever seen. It became very personal for me specifically, knowing that, if you remember what we talked about earlier, I had literally left Maui and came home to a fire destroying my neighborhood and literally changing my life. And then when I finally got a break from fire recovery for about a week, months and months and months and months and months later, I went back to Maui because I wanted to kind of have a redo. I wanted my daughter to be able to come home from Maui and have good memories, not have an entire crazy fun trip with her that then basically was just scrubbed away by the trauma and the shock of having things turned upside down. So that was huge. And then the realizing that now not only am I deploying to Maui, but I'm being asked to be on conference calls with them daily, to pick up the phone and answer questions and help them review documents, to provide documents, to answer questions. It started to realize like I actually like want to be doing this. I enjoy doing this. And this is like becoming more than just Paul providing quote unquote mutual aid to Maui. It's me wanting to not only help Maui, but wanting to help John, wanting to help the community, wanting to help, whether it was meeting Uncle Earl, all these people that
Love him.
that have become important people, which I would never have guessed in like after the fire's lives. But the leadership. I mean, I was just in Maui with after the fire.
A month ago? No, that was
many months ago.
February. We were just there a month ago. We were there with you in February. That was literally one of the best. I think that was actually the best deployment we've ever had, the February one.
And to not have seen Chemo, who is one of the managers of water, had not seen him for probably a year, and for him to see me and immediately like we just gave each other a big hug, like you realize the impacts that we had on each other at all different levels, and that we were truly connected purely because of a disastrous incident. And that's one of the things that I've always said, like, you know, no one wants to go through these things. We did not want to be the most disastrous struck fire in the state's history in 2017. But we definitely didn't want to lose that title in 2018 when Paradise took it, because that means that somebody has gone through somebody worse. And it was horrible to then see it in what took place, not only obviously in Lahaina, but in Los Angeles. But from all these horrific events has truly come a ton of good and a lot of progress, a lot of improvements, a lot of relationships, and more importantly, organizations like After the Fire that have continued to foster a lot of that recovery networking.
Paul, you grew up in Pasadena.
So I will back up a little bit. I was initially deployed to Los Angeles during the Eaton fire as a public information officer to support CAL FIRE's incident management team. While I was down there, I was initially assigned to deal with media relations and media interviews on behalf of CAL FIRE to speak to the incident. Within a couple hours, they realized that I was actually from the area, that I could pronounce communities correctly, that it was La Cañada, not La Canada, a lot of different things that all of a sudden leadership started realizing, wait a second, we need to use him differently. And they pulled me off of media and they had me start working on delegation tours and leading conversations with elected officials, with assembly members, the governor's office, Congress members, council members, you name it. But
celebrities, I'm going to name it.
Them too. But because not only could I speak to the incident, but I grew up in the area. My middle school burned down. My temple burned down. Areas that I grew up into as a kid were just completely destroyed. And so it was another fire that was very personal to me. And after I was released from the incident to quote unquote go back home, even on my drive down to the fire, I was actually on conference calls with LA City's leadership, where they wanted to have a call with me and a lot of other city of Santa Rosa officials to start asking us recovery questions. And those conversations kept happening while I was down there, which is probably no secret, what led to Cal OES realizing, hey, we need to foster this relationship, and we want to bring you guys down.
Paul.
Yes.
Paul, so you go and you're with somebody you've been with, and you hear that they want to go take something out of your temple that burned down. I think so. Can you, Paul, take us to that stage of it? Fewer conference calls. Adore you. Okay. Fewer of that. Less of that.
So I was in the field. I had a public information officer from a Central Valley Fire Department with me. We were driving on Lake Avenue on the north end of Altadena. It was kind of showing around, and we were doing what we were supposed to be doing in the field and facilitating media requests. I saw it was the first time I'd actually been over to where my temple, where I was bar mitzvahed as a kid, had been destroyed. I pulled up in front of it. And we were kind of standing there, and a guy came up to the gate because they had it secured, even though everything was completely destroyed, and asked if we needed anything. And I said, no, we just want to check to see how you guys are doing, if there's anything you need from us. And the gentleman started trying to explain to me what this building was and kind of the history to it. And I tried explaining very cautiously and carefully that I knew what it was, and understand that there was clearly a lot of emotions that were taking place on the individuals that were inside of the compound, the facility within the gate. And once he realized that I was understanding what a cantor is, what a rabbi is, and that clearly he was able to get to a point where I was kind of able to interrupt and say, hey, I went here. My dad is this individual, and it was kind of processing in his mind. And then all of a sudden he looked at me. He's like, wait, are you friends with him? And he mentioned the family's names. I said, yes. He's like, you're the family that they visit every Thanksgiving. Oh, you're the fired. We've heard about you. And then as that conversation was taking place, the rabbi for the temple was just showing up, and she was seeing everything for the first time, and having her arrive as I was arriving, and having her piece together that who I was, why we were there, that we all arrived at the same time. There was a lot, and then realizing that they were there to try and save some very valuable relics from the temple itself, and we were able to kind of help quickly grab some of those things for them. Clearly was very emotional for them, and rightfully so. But then again, was becoming very clear that this was going to, again, be another fire that was going to be pretty personal to me.
And then you walk back, and the other public information officer said to you,
yeah, that public information officer.
I do listen to you when we're in places, just so you know.
So what's that?
I do listen when you're talking. Yeah. When you're telling stories, I listen. Mm-hmm.
You do. So he was not able to, and clearly it's kind of hard to go into a lot of detail. Everything went down, but I mean, fire people, we're tough. And he watched the interactions between myself and the temple leadership, and he had to leave. He was starting to become pretty emotional, and had to step out of the area and go back to the vehicle. But it's it was extremely important. It was clearly everything was there at the right place at the right time. For us to happen to show up, for them to happen to be arriving, for the connections to happen, and for us to be able to be there and offer the comfort in our, as fire service personnel, that it had nothing to do with me being with Santa Rosa Fire and him being from a department in Central Valley. It was us being there on behalf of the fire and public safety community, to make sure we were there for that community. And that's really what this is always about, we are representing and there to support the people in need, whether it's part of the initial response or part of the long-term recovery.
It's a particular knowing that once you know it or see it or feel it, like the loss is so profound and it's so widespread, and there's, you just aren't the same after. And so I think that when we all show up in these communities, like one of the reasons why it works is because they're not having to jazz hands their pain for us. They don't have to do any of that. Like, it's a language, it's a shorthand, it's a knowing. And in the case of in Maui, Archie Kalepa talks about this. He's like, it's the gentle way that we came into the community, which is mirrored in how you come in from a technical perspective, but there's a gentleness to it that understands their pain. I just think it's magical like that.
Yes, it is. It's amazing. Like we said, how far I've come, we've all come, how we continue to evolve, how we continue to improve the experiences that we have. It'll be weird when I finally, retire from Santa Rosa Fire and think about all the things that I've done over the years, and what the future looks like. But I couldn't imagine not having some sort of involvement now in fire recovery, both short and long term. You feel like it almost becomes like a passion or something that you just enjoy doing, and clearly in some cases are doing it just because you want to do it.
Paul Lowenthal, what gives you hope?
I think the reaction that we get, the fact that we continue to impact lives directly or indirectly, that we see the light kind of come on during some of these conversations. You can see the pendulum shift, and that they're understanding, they're getting it, and they're ultimately helping their own communities through whether it's our experiences or just us listening to them. I don't want it to ever sound like we're telling people how to do to do their jobs. It's we are a resource, or we are just somebody to listen to bounce ideas off, and to see like a recovery of communities, whether a little or a lot. And to see the people that we've directly impacted and the relationships that we formed provides a lot of hope.
It's pretty profound, right? It's the river of human kindness in the middle of all of these terrible events is really quite something. But I know what you mean. Like when you see the dawning behind their eyes, we're not just like showing up to sell them something. The dawning followed by the relief, and then the relationship can begin. And so I appreciate that we've covered all of that. We did get some conference calls in there, so I know that's important. I'm not going to take them out. It's all good. Paul Lowenthal, I want to thank you for being on How to Disaster. I also want to thank you for all of the time that you have spent with After the Fire, for giving us a chance, us and our feelings talk, because I've really enjoyed having you there, but I am going to tease you forever. So thank you once again. Yeah, thank you for being here and being our friend and our colleague and our volunteer. We really appreciate you.
I appreciate you, and thank you very much.